Welcome to Caizin Commune Podcast, Who Has a Clue, where we talk to people who indeed do have a clue, such as yourself. And today's topic for the podcast is giving constructive feedback. It may seem like a trivial topic for a podcast, but the more and more modern day leaders that I work with, I see they have the passion and the empathy for their people. But using feedback as a very strong tool for performance enhancement is, I believe, quite a lost art. What happens then is that leaders tend to attract only those people who can work with their nuances and their own management style, and possibly lose out on really good talent. Because constructive criticism is hard if you learn it, it's great. In that context, Gauri, I would really like you to introduce yourself to our audience and also maybe take up the first question. What is feedback?
Pleasure meeting you again, Ameya. And to give you, a quick overview, I have been in the field of training and consulting. So that's all I've known forever. 19 years that I've been in this field, in this domain.
Wow.
I have been literally connected with corporates, and I'm primarily do leadership trainings, and I enjoy doing psychology-based, training sessions as well. So that's
Awesome.
one of the things that I truly enjoy. Yeah, and I'm also into a bit of counseling, and yeah, so that's a quick bit that I can share about myself. It's been a while, that I have been talking about this particular topic, giving and receiving feedback. Trust me,
Yes.
nobody is wired, to receive feedback. None of us really want a feedback. Who wants it? Just think about it. We essentially run away from it. And at the moment there is this one question, we need to talk. Can we talk? It's
And that generally never follows like a good conversation when you say that.
Exactly. So I've seen that the way it is done is sometimes quite intimidating, and people tend to find it extremely embarrassing, or it's a blot for some of us that we just don't know what to do about. Many times I've seen that feedback, and what I've seen is when it comes to a feedback, organizations usually go ahead and invest a lot on how to give feedback. And it's funny how, this push mechanism is enforced literally that, this is what you need to do. Here's what, the plan of action is. And here's what, the person is supposed to work out and, figure out the things like, and you need to come back with a plan. And that person is, I'm sure, zapped, not aware of how it's going to be. Or maybe as a person who's going to receive the feedback, I'm the one who's essentially hoping against hope that I get somebody who is considerate enough giving me the feedback.
So true, so true. But tell me something, Gauri, before we actually even jump into the workplace. Do you think the reason why we, or at least Indians, are conditioned that way is because of our social construct? And let me explain that, why I say that, because in the growing up years, now I don't want to kind of generalize the entire period of the 90s when the today 40s leaders have actually grown up in. But I do believe to a certain extent it starts at home. Our parents, how they coach us, how they kind of teach us or correct us when we go wrong or make mistakes. Our teachers at school, the way they do that. Our siblings, of course, and siblings actually grow up fighting, quarreling, squabbling, whatever it is, right? And then, of course, friends. Growing up, nobody actually banks on saying, okay, you're going to be my BFF for the friends for life. People are happy to hop onto another person if they don't actually get along with one particular person. And I feel the construct of feedback does not really exist formally in any of these relationships. So if you look at it, did we ever give, at least I did not give any feedback to my parents saying, you know what, this is what you did wrong. And now I know it now maybe, but maybe I did not know it back then. Well, I guess it's too late. They can't do anything about it. So, and same goes for our teachers. How many professors or how many teachers did I actually give feedback saying, you could have taught this better, or I actually did not understand anything that you taught. I mean, you could not relate to the topic at all. So the point I'm trying to get to is that I think there is a sense of authority, and that actually has translated to our workplaces also. So a sense of authority when giving feedback is kind of instilled in a very unsaid kind of a manner. And we kind of believe that if somebody has to give feedback, it has to be somebody with a position of authority more than anything else. And that's how these workplace structures have come up to be. Right now you have 360-degree feedback. Now you have peer feedback, and then peer reviews happen, so on and so forth. But you touched upon a very interesting topic. So when you dilute that sense of authority, also opening up that two-way communication channel is extremely important. So it actually becomes a part of the culture. Could you tell me, what are your observations? So where do popular, or let's say even good leaders, happen to go wrong when it is actually giving, when it comes to giving feedback?
Ameya, you just mentioned a wonderful point there, where when we talk about the culture of impact, it has a tremendous impact on the way a person or the organization, the system, essentially looks at, even talking about it, or the feedback, the way it needs to be done. Is there a culture where we really follow where, a feedback is normalized? Do we normalize giving and receiving feedback? So as you said very rightly, it is going to go back to those days, that era where we were growing up, and as a child, how was it? How was it really? So if you went wrong, either there was some reprimand or there was shouting, or you were punished for doing certain things, and that's it. So the way we learned things was, if I do this will happen.
Right. So and if I do something, I may get rewarded also. So
exactly.
It worked both ways.
Something good. Exactly. So if I do something good, I am rewarded. So when I essentially understand this as the basis, imagine when I grow up to become the adult who is supposed to give a feedback to someone, and I'm taught in the corporate world that, as a leader, you're supposed to give a feedback to people. Performance improvement. You need to start thinking from that point of view. How will you go about it? Now imagine a leader who already has that kind of a learning for a very long period in life, is suddenly going to shift into giving a feedback. That conditioning, absolutely, that conditioning matters. Now imagine I have to unlearn a lot of things and learn a brand new format where I need to now endorse the things that I've been told by the superiors, maybe. So it's essentially all tell mode that I'm going to get into. Think about it.
Yeah.
I will get in the tell mode. I will get in the push mode.
Correct. So in absolute technical terms, right? Control systems also. I'm sorry to take this example, not equating machines with man at all, but in control systems also, you actually absorb a part of your output and bring it back to your input, and that creates a feedback loop. It's the most simplistic form of feedback, maybe that one may define. But of course, then over a period of time, things get extremely complex and complicated. So there will be hard topics to give feedback on. There will be something very simple. I guess positive feedback is the easiest one to give. Very few people can go wrong with it, but I have seen there have been instances where people have probably overdone it, and such that the significance of that positive feedback also has lost. So but before we probably jump right there, I want to just kind of expand a little bit more on that culture thing of the organization that you said. I've seen a lot of leaders. So let's start with the most mature state of the organizations, right? Where a lot of leaders have been given frameworks. So they are like, this is our performance and review framework, whether it is OKRs or KRAs or KPIs, whatever it is, everybody has a goal. Right. These are the means to that goal, and you do X, Y, Z. You get 3 points, you do A, B, C, you get 4 points, so on and so forth. And then the whole rationalization concepts comes in, and all the ratings are normalized, and somebody gets 3.26, somebody is 3.5, whatever. some teams kind of translate these ratings into salary slabs and appraisals and so on and so forth. I believe this has actually come to be to primarily because we have to manage a performance of maybe a large number of people that is there, India being India. So we do have a lot of people to manage. But also because I think conversations are a little hard to have. And not everybody would be equipped. Like you said, I would hope and pray that my manager is considerate enough to give me a good review. And so is the HR person who gives me a good appraisal maybe. So if we hope and pray that, then I think we are shifting the focus to rely more on the framework versus the actual ability of the person to conduct that review or just do that. But from your training experience, has anyone ever come to you and approached you saying, these are these difficult topics. I really like this guy. But if I'm going to tell him something, he's maybe just leave his job. Can you just help me facilitate that conversation?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I have definitely come across people talking to me about, a situation where, there's so I'll give you this one classic example. So there was this manager who had a wonderful team, and there was this one guy who was tenured enough. I mean, pretty well established. They were working pretty well. But this guy, unfortunately, needed to be given a feedback in terms of the performance because there was no diversification in the way he was, working, and that was the only thing that was holding the things back. And besides, the management had also mentioned that this year we need to downsize, a few people, and unfortunately, we cannot, have A, B, C people. So his name was unfortunately a part of that list. Now, this guy had a tremendous time, to somehow gather all the energy to, connect with this guy. Because everything else was fine. But how to connect? Now, it is seen everywhere on LinkedIn of late that you just send one email and people are fired, or you have a common meeting and on that platform you say that that all of you who are invited here are actually going, something of that sort. But this doesn't work everywhere. Some people find it very difficult. Now, again, Ameya, there are, of course, a variety of things that you need to consider when you talk about giving a feedback. It also matters how I am as a person. So again, a little bit of psychology, but then we had to do some analysis. We had to understand what his style is of connecting with the person, how he prefers talking to the person, and then he needs to be able to communicate the point across. I know it doesn't make sense because bad news is bad news. End of the day.
Yeah.
But are you assertive enough? Are you able to make your point there? Are you able to make an offer that makes sense to that person? You still can make an offer which is going to connect the dots. See, there are certain things that you need to understand where if it's a bad news, you can't sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
You just can't. I mean,
that's the worst you can do.
There is no way. Yeah. So like I said, I remember talking about a sandwich method. The sandwich method is absolutely bygone. I mean, we cannot be talking like this ever. Like, you can't sugarcoat something, then come up with something bitter, and then again come up with something, nice. You can't do that, right? Because the person already knows what you're going to get at. We're not children anymore. Even the children these days understand when it's coming, So,
right.
I mean, there's no point. So if there is a feedback to be given, you must understand that it's not giving the feedback, you're sharing it.
Yeah. It's a two-way conversation, really, not a...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the moment my mindset is about giving some feedback to a person, it's like I'm giving a piece of my mind to someone. But the moment I think about it as share, seek, if I want to share and then seek, it becomes a lot more easy. It's conversational.
Right. So true.
Come what may. I mean, whether it's good, bad, ugly.
Correct. No, absolutely right. I agree to that. Absolutely. I think we need a constant reminder that feedback always has good intents. Nobody wants to kind of force oneself on someone else saying, no, this is my opinion. This is how things should be. That's not the point. That's not the intent of feedback at all. Improvement and growth is, of course, the expected outcome of a feedback, and definitely not to judge. It's not a judgment call saying, because I think that this is right, that's why you are wrong. It doesn't work like that. And of course, somewhere you want that person to grow as an individual, right? You want that person to reduce the number of missteps that he may take at work. You want to save the pitfalls that he may go through over a period of time. And to give you an example of Agile retrospectives, right? There is already a framework. There is a Agile event of sorts where at the end of the sprint, the team gets together and kind of introspects, really. The retrospective is for the 2 weeks gone by, but it should start with an introspection as to, if these were my team goals, where we are today, what did we do that maybe we did 80% of the job very well, 20% did not go right, and how each one of us can contribute it for the next sprint. So this collective feedback mechanism, at least, is a lot better than maybe finger pointing. But because people are people.
Ameya, I'm sorry, but I need to make a quick point here. Sure. When it comes to the frameworks, you have everything ready. It's like you have the pointers ready, where the goal is, what we wanted to achieve versus what we are doing at the moment. Everything is seen. But think about it. There's no human touch.
Yes.
What I'm trying to say is, what happens is we are so engrossed in looking at the frameworks that the human in that is lost. So you're actually looking at the paperwork, you're looking at the course of action, how it was, how it is, and you're essentially hyper-focused, I would say, on what that person did and did not do.
Yeah. And that is the reason why practical advice does not come through, right? And people just give opinions saying, you did a shitty job. What am I going to do about it? So tell me why exactly it was shitty.
So what can I do? Framework. True. So I may have a framework which is fabulous. I may have everything ready. Everything is put up on the walls. People can go ahead and have a quick look at it. But what next? Are you really connecting with the people? Are you trying to understand why those things did not work? Are you trying to also make an effort to see what can be done to improve that situation, keeping in view the human over there, the individual over there?
Right. Oh, that is the exact reason why. So you enter this realm of this doctor-patient model, right? The Pendleton model.
True.
That is excellent. So, at least the only thing different in that model is that the patient has some symptoms that's why he comes to the doctor. But if you remove that bit of it, if the symptoms are already there, for example, your delivery quality is hit, or maybe you're not keeping enough time, you're not able to work from home, not able to focus, whatever it is, and that the doctor takes note of it, in which case he's the manager. It always starts with curiosity more than judgment. Yes. So the doctor never says, I told you to lose weight. You didn't do anything about it. So you can't be complaining about your lower back pain now. But that's not how the doctor behaves. He is usually asking questions more than anything else. What did you do? What did you do? What did you do wrong? Do you think this may have caused something like that? So this curiosity kind of which makes the realization or drives the introspection within the patient, that helps giving feedback a lot easier. So when we say, yes, I completely agree that the overdoing frameworks is it has always been an overkill. At the end of the day, if it's going to translate to a number and a rating, it actually means nothing if it has fallen on deaf ears, really. So actionable feedback, actions coming out of feedback, if that's not happening, so definitely not. And the reason why I'm also a fan of Pendleton method is because it actually banks on patients' buy-in onto the feedback, right? So your employee, your colleague whom you're giving a feedback, he actually buys and saying, okay, yes, I realize this is the problem. I will not eat junk food, so on and so forth. And he pledges to himself or herself.
Correct.
And that's how things work. So I love that model. So yeah. Okay, so we started our conversation saying it is a lost art. People cannot give a good feedback, and we already know that feedback is important for several reasons. At least at workplace, you can form deeper relationships with your colleagues and your team if you can freely and openly express and tell them what is it. It is quite possible that maybe it's just your perception, and that is the reason why curiosity benefits there. You ask questions as to what went wrong, see if they are at least on the same page. Many times the disconnect also is the primary reason why the feedback falls flat, right? The employee thinks he's doing absolutely amazing job at his workplace, and he's like excelling and he's so happy about it. And suddenly this talk happens one day where the manager tells him, dude, you're just working at like 50% of your potential. And he's like, what are you talking about? I thought I was doing absolutely great. So such revelations also have to be avoided, and that is the reason why maybe starting with the questions definitely help. But let's talk about the receiving side of it.
Yes.
In my world, at least, and you can correct me if you have observed otherwise, these performance review exercises which happen annually, right? And the reason why I believe that they're not the best, and we will talk about the mature companies and organizations also a little bit later. But to tell a dog not to pee on the carpet cannot happen once a year, right? So this ability of continuous feedback and setting up a cadence on how often you give that feedback can be done formally. But do you think that employees should actually seek feedback as well? Like, I mean, they can approach just to say, I mean, just for I won't call it validation, because now it's quite misconstrued in today's era that we are living in. I don't want to get into the whole toxic positivity and validation kind of a thing, that you should not need validation, you're enough for yourself, etc. I'm not touching that bit at all. But at least at workplace, if your KPIs and your goals are not achieved, or this realization that you may have underachieved a particular target demands certain validation, and it demands a retrospective or someone's blessing, or maybe a review from someone. How important it is, according to you, to even seek feedback?
I would say that it's very important to be able to face it. It's important to understand that, let me put it this way. Human beings are wired in a very interesting manner. We are wired to learn and grow. We are essentially wired to learn and grow. But what happens here is we forget that important bit, and we essentially look at people who give feedback, and that's it, because they are the ones who are giving it. They are the bosses. They are the managers. So they are entitled to give a feedback. So I don't necessarily make an effort to seek feedback, but what I want is, I want intrinsic rewards. I want intrinsic, praises. When I want people to look at me and say that, hey, that is good, but they never appreciate me. So that appreciation is what becomes, a way of looking at receiving feedback. And then that is discussed. And then there is a great point that, people never appreciate him. Nobody appreciates him. And then the yearly feedback, that round that takes place, I think I've done the best. I did everything. I gave my 100%, but I was not appreciated enough.
Right.
Now, it's not only one person's fault here. It's entire system. And that's where I'm going to say that, again, receiving feedback, yes, is important. Of course, is important. However, just think about it this way. Can we create a culture in the organization where feedback is supposed to be a normal, process?
Yeah, a continuous
it's a part
thing,
and
yes.
parcel of the system. So giving and receiving feedback shouldn't come across as a separate effort. It should be a part of the system. So, many companies of late I have seen, it is quite common for them to discuss frequently. It's literally a weekly meet that we have where there's a quick word or two that people have. And it's quite a norm. And people are okay with it.
Yeah.
The ones who are not okay are the ones, who probably own companies nowadays. The ones who have recently joined as freshers maybe are okay. They're okay with the feedback because the system is normalized for them. They're taught from school that they're supposed to receive feedback and give feedback as well. So teachers also get a feedback from students. It is as normal as that.
Yeah. No, so you actually touched that point
that we're discussing. Yes.
Right. So I was reading about the culture at OpenAI, right? Even Sam Altman and stuff like that, they talk about it.
Yes.
Google has been doing that for quite some time now.
True.
Google has gone through the transition of multiple performance review frameworks until one fine day they just said that let's just abolish all of it, right? Because the entire employee's performance is a continuously evolving document. It is not to be opened twice a year or once a year or whatever it is. It is an evolving document. If an incident happens, it has to be reported, whether positive or negative, does not matter. That document has to be opened and it has to be updated, whether it is online or Excel document, does not matter. The medium does not matter. But I like the fact that how these companies have translated this entire thing into a continuous nature so that you don't have to de-talk. The special nature of that de-talk has kind of completely diluted, and it makes these conversations very easy to have. And I mean, I have not seen Indian companies do this successfully at all. I'm sorry to say, but I'm yet to come across an Indian company, or at least even a unit of a foreign company surviving in India doing that successfully, because. And at the end of the day, all these appraisal conversations get extremely difficult. And if the performance is positive, of course, it's going to be very breezy. Yes. But the performance is not, and you want the person to take the feedback constructively and move ahead. This critical feedback is very hard to deliver, especially when the person does not even expect it or is closed about it. As much as giving feedback is important, maybe people should be open to receiving feedback as well. And in fact, they don't have to wait for the formal cycle of the review. They can break the cycle always. And if they feel that they have achieved something, an important milestone, which requires a review, so be it. They can always demand one. But so much pressure on the HR systems, right, today to get this right in the first go, because this is not, once they roll out any kind of this metric, there's no going back, and you can't be really testing such theories on your employees. That's not going to go down well.
So true. Absolutely. But it's important to share, seek, and continue. Maybe just think about, it as a very simple, basic, form where you share the feedback, seek feedback, and continue. It's like a typical journey, normalize this. I would say that instead of waiting for somebody to come to you and then opening up about what you think and then getting into a fight, maybe for all you know, because by the time there is a lot that is, sort of saturated maybe, and then you need to blurt it out. And that makes no sense, because I've seen a lot of times the yearly meets of these sort end up becoming a huge, menace where people end up fighting, and it's something they're not okay with. But then there is a way to think about, how to go about it, right? So the share, seek, continue needs to be like a, continual process, I would say. It's important.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can you comment on the direction of the feedback as well? So we already spoke of dual communication. It has to flow both ways. I also think that feedback has to flow all ways, really. I mean, it doesn't have to be just up, down from your superior to your subordinate or anything like that. It can be amongst peers also, within the team members as well. Otherwise, these cold wars seem to exist, right? People cannot work harmoniously together, and it gets difficult to, constantly go over the same thing over and over again. But crossing the thin line of insubordination, How well does that go? Because now we spoke about seeking feedback as well. Now, if let's say the senior is seeking feedback from his juniors, he cannot be saying. So this whole thing about give me anonymous feedback is, to me, does not make sense at all, right? You have to be accountable for what you're saying. I love that. If somebody is just coming up to me and saying, what you're doing is absolutely crap, I can take that, and I would work with that person to at least make sure that he or she is happy with what I'm delivering. But this feedback always, would you recommend a particular model or a team structure or an organization structure where this can be sort of facilitated or be a part of the growing up culture itself?
Right. So I've seen, in the recent past, I was working closely with one of my clients, and they had a wonderful, game format, It was nice where, so fishing for compliments is something that people love to do. I mean, how do you like this? Is it okay? Did you like this? So they played this particular game where they actually had a bowl where every person gets a feedback, good, bad, ugly, whatever it is, and they actually created that kind of a culture where you pick that shit up for yourself, because there's a bowl right next to you. So there's going to be a small bowl right next to each person sitting in that cubicle. So each person has, say, 5 chits if you have 5 members in each team. And each member gets a particular, comment, whether it's a compliment, whether it's, a feedback. Now, it can be direct, it can be indirect. It can be pinpointed. It can be written in any way, any format, okay? Or it can be just a simple, one-liner about the person. Come what may. It's a nice way to understand where we are at the moment. It's a subtle way to communicate within the team. I've seen that it works, it doesn't work. There are people who like it, dislike it. There are going to be people who are definitely naysayers. I mean, there are going to be people who are not going to like it. But come on, end of the day, if as a team, as a unit, you start following certain things, it does become a routine. So going for a team outing is not that everybody wants to do. But then there are select few who are always keen and enthusiastic about doing things.
Oh, yeah, yes.
And it happens. It happens. There are going to be chances. So like I say, always, there are people who usually are heard, listened to because they go for a smoke break together.
Oh, that reminds me, I'm sorry to cut your line of thought, but I definitely have to tell this to you. So I'm somebody who likes talking about what has happened in the day with my colleagues, right? So I do that pretty often, over informal, like just the way you say. I don't smoke, but I passively smoke with my colleagues. Accompany them over chai or whatever it is. I take these chai sutta breaks with them. And then obviously we do talk of topics out of work as well, but whatever happens at work also gets discussed. And incidentally, so happened that for a few people, I had these informal conversations like, hey, you know what, you could do something like this also. And what it did not strike me that this got translated into the official document of the performance reviews. And those guys were pissed. They were like, it was a chai sutta conversation. It was not a formal conversation, all right? So you cannot be telling me there that I was supposed to fix something and then bring it up 6 months later in my performance review. So that's when I realized that certain things have to be formalized and they need a formal structure to do that. So it is not something to be taken lightly, for sure. You can always soften the blow. So I love this gamification idea that you spoke about. You can always soften the blow, start with that, but definitely conclude with a formal remark or an official note saying, okay, this was recognized, acknowledged, and documented, and this stays with us. I also like that softening blow. I mean, my mind is running wild right now with this gamification. It is a great idea to do that because it is not anonymous at the same time, but it also gives out a very friendly way of saying, you know what, this could be better. And I really trust you to do that. So It is about recognizing others' capabilities, saying you can definitely rise up to that level and perform better. I am confident of that. Hence, I'm giving you that feedback. That instills a lot of faith and also gives responsibility, saying, go. I mean, it's a cheerful way of saying, we are all with you. Just go ahead and do it. Nothing should stop you. That's an excellent way of putting things across. But I read somewhere, and you can correct me again, because being a psychology background, you can probably tell me, human brain cannot distinguish between a verbal attack and a physical one. So the first sense of defense that the body gets into is a physical trauma of something spoken. And that is the reason why there is physical distress when you're getting negative feedback. And I wanted to say this because I don't know if people actually know about it. Your sweaty palms and people just profusely sweating in their performance review meetings. Some people even break down sometimes emotionally. So the physical translation of what you have spoken can actually have a very big impact. And I would really like you to throw some light on this. I mean, psychologically speaking.
That is, yes. Oh my God, it's a lot. Just think about it. So just with the pitch that I have, okay, if I yell at you and I start giving you a mouthful about, wrong, in your mind, what is the translation that you would have? You would essentially think that I'm attacking. Yeah. Imagine the words that I say and the way I say it is remembered first. And if I then attack you, it's going to be it's going to be endorsed. Like, oh my God, if I physically attack you now, I'm sure you're going to recall every moment that we must have had in that meeting room that I yelled, shouted, and then I also physically attacked you. When the person is giving it a feedback, it's a lot to translate. We are wired in such a way, I mean, like I told you some time ago, that, we learn and grow. But, there is this fun fact. Before that, what happens is we operate out of fear. So you're prepping every moment. The moment you're called in the meeting room, you're already operating out of fear. You're already operating in that domain that, okay, if this person says this, I should have this. If he says this, we operate out of fear, right? I mean, majority number of times you will see that I'm prepping myself in a way where I need to go ahead and say this so that, I'm able to make my point. I start working in that manner. And then the moment I get in the meeting room, if I'm actually shown, what I did and how I went wrong and everything, is put in a negative order, maybe that turns out to be a bigger attack. And it's a fight or flight response that I will get into, because I'm not essentially ready in my mind to go ahead and think about the options. Like, okay, fair enough. I'm not looking at the feedback as a simple, suggestion or a simple recommendation, or I'm not even looking at anything of that sort that I should. What happens here is a feedback is usually targeting the person. Many a times I've seen people target the person. You're stupid. You're such a fool. How could you do that? You always do this. Adverbs used, at its best. So you're always like this. You never do this. So it becomes like a typical, format that the person doesn't understand it. But then if the feedback is, directed towards maybe the action or the behavior, maybe the person is able to now listen. So that's where you create that safe space for the person, when you're, seeking to understand rather than to tell. The moment you get in the tell mode that, you need to do this, work on this. I recommend you start working on these projects, start taking a training on this. I'm going to enroll you in this training. so on and so forth, or, the performance improvement plan or whatsoever, I don't know what all is discussed, at this very moment. Instead of getting in the tell mode, it becomes a lot more easy to allow that person to speak for once. Imagine, as a person who's giving the feedback, we're not literally giving the feedback. What I'm trying to put before you is, Ameya, just imagine it's such a myth that if I'm giving a feedback, I'm the one who's talking. I need to talk and the person has to listen. It's not so. You talk less, you ask just one question, allow the other person to speak. Sometimes when the other person speaks, they themselves have answers to everything.
True. That is absolutely right. So, yeah, I mean, you touched everything really. So, the person who's giving feedback, senior or whosoever it is, they need to be absolutely cognizant and aware of the fact that that feedback can trigger the opposite person. And it would help to just plan or prepare for it. It would definitely help to do that. Do your homework. I would suggest everybody to, before entering a difficult conversation, always do your homework. Maybe that definitely helps. Just lay out all your pieces. In fact, what I've realized is that when you're giving feedback, you tend to become, especially when it's critical feedback, you tend to become the villain. Feedback gets personified very, very easily and very fast. So the person who's receiving the feedback, he's like, he thinks so. This particular person thinks so. Does not mean that everybody, so they try to generalize and they try to pacify or console themselves that may not be the popular opinion. And that is when evidence comes to play, right? I mean, so you actually start with the symptoms, just like the doctor method, or you start with the evidence, focus on the evidence and focus on what we want to achieve. And then come back to the whole self-realization and the introspection and saying, okay, just call spade a spade and let's get done with. I mean, this is very important.
Absolutely.
And being vulnerable helps that's what I've seen. I mean, there is no harm
in
showing that you are a human. The opposite person is also a human being. It's absolutely okay. You will be as uncomfortable giving that feedback as much as the opposite person is uncomfortable receiving it. So nobody has to play the higher ground really, because at the end of the day, everybody wants growth and improvement and do bigger and better things. We have our personal goals to meet, make X money, work with X person, work for an X company, whatever it is. We have our personal goals, and feedback is a channel to just get faster and closer to that particular goal, because somebody is telling you, ultimately we have to work together in this whole world. We can't exist by ourselves. So true, yeah. So I also wanted to take you, because you have already done these trainings and stuff like that. You already spoke about the tone, how you deliver that particular feedback. Do you think language barrier comes in the way sometimes? Like some people cannot probably express. I mean, I've seen these elaborate documents that HR gives people to fill, right? Right. Your performance appraisals are going to be subjective. They're a little bit elaborate. So people who may not be comfortable with English, and we don't expect them to be comfortable with language anymore. ChatGPT to the rescue. But having said that, is there a language barrier? And at least maybe, I know, so that's how we also got introduced. You did actually conduct a session for my company on language, and that was the basic grammar. If I remember correctly, it was actually just the fundamentals about how to be just kind and nice to each other using the language. So what do you think? How important does language play a role in giving and receiving feedback?
Wow. So I wish I could demonstrate, so Ameya, if I'm talking to you in this tone, how does it seem?
Yeah, you're shouting.
See, when I'm yelling, my tone is like this, but my choice of words is okay. But my tone is slightly higher, the pitch is higher, but I'm yelling literally. It may come across as somebody who is slightly authoritative or aggressive, as a personality. And my choice of words is still simple. Do you see the choice of words is not at all aggressive. I've not used any abusive word. I've not used anything that is, so I did not do that intentionally. But my tone is high, the pitch is high in such a way that the person who's listening to me may start getting the message otherwise. Number one. Now comes the language. Now comes the words, the actual words that we cherry pick. Okay. Now think about it this way. The rudimentary usage of words versus the flowery language. Okay. You will understand who comes from what base or what background, the way they express themselves. And I think it is absolutely okay for a person to express himself or herself in no matter what broken language they speak, whether it's English, whether it's Hindi, Marathi, whatever language that they want to, communicate their point across to you.
Yeah, it should be
at least let them say it, and if that person is not comfortable, suddenly is overwhelmed, starts feeling like, it's too much to, say anything, maybe you just allow that person to, take some time off. It's not always across the table. It's not always across the table that you have to talk. In a lot of ways, when we counsel, we never sit across the table. There are times where we have to sit side. Yes, there are times where we have to sit next, also. So close by, not close by as in that close, but then you need to understand that you cannot be keeping that barrier many a times. That is also a very, it's intimidating. People do not feel comfortable. It's like you go for an interview. Do you see how you go through that entire process of responding to the questions right, being sensible enough, being able to make sense of what all that person says and asks, and you also making, enough sense to what that person has asked you. What I'm trying to get at is the moment there is a barrier in between, many a times people find it intimidating. Sometimes you need to break those barriers. Understand that it can be just one chair or two chairs, maybe just in that room, or maybe you can, actually have your feedback over a cup of coffee.
Right.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
It also reduces the anxiety, the kind of pressure that is built up. And that's where, when you talk about the Pendleton's, model, where you treat the person as a patient, over here, I'm going to go otherwise. That, why treat somebody as that? You would treat the person as an individual.
Correct.
So when the person wants to open up, that person will open up.
Right.
And it happens that there is a vibe at times that the person feels like sharing a bit more than what is required. And it is extremely difficult to address those issues, when you're least expecting it.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
So true. And for some reason, I just feel that companies take this for granted. I mean, I don't know many companies. I mean, you can tell, your business must be definitely flourishing, I'm sure. But you can tell how many companies actually take this seriously and train their leaders to prepare for conversations like this. I know, especially when COVID happened, getting work done from home, from people, was a big issue. And it was across the industry. It was so obvious. Otherwise, this whole mass resignations and this whole, because the resignations were happening, people were switching the
sales
salary
target
brackets.
Reviews online.
Everything just got, so because of something simple as that, right? Nobody was trained or even ready for something like COVID to happen. But again, if people were actually trained to just have good conversations, good constructive conversations, without medium being a barrier, like how you're saying, you could do it over a cup of coffee, you can do it in a conference room, you can do it over Zoom. I think people should consciously start investing in this. They would actually save a lot of resources and money and time down the lane and down the year. So if you safeguard these qualities and imbibe this culture, you would not spend a lot of time recruiting and hiring up people, because you would have increased your retention so much. Employees do value this a lot. If you can see yourself grow with the organization, you see that the organization and the leaders care for you. Obviously, they know that the value the organization gives you, or the people give you, or the work is enriching your own experience, people will definitely stay.
The food for thought here is you're working for the organization or you're working for the leader.
Right.
And and that's where a lot of revelation actually takes place, because the moment I start thinking about impressing a person, I go out and out, and maybe I start thinking accordingly. No, you know what? This person likes the documentation done in this way. And that is the word of mouth. And everybody knows it, and maybe the person doesn't know it, but everybody in the team knows it. And what I'm trying to say is, this also is a feedback. This is also a subtle way of people letting you know that, nahi, aapko aise acha lagta hai, right? Aapko aise hi acha lagta hai. Now, this needs to be taken as a feedback. Sometimes people don't have the courage to say this to you directly, but subtly they just end up saying it. Innocence, I would say. And as a manager, maybe I need to pick things from these little sharings as well. It's a way that I can learn that, hey, you know what, maybe I'm being a bit too particular about things. What can I do to improve the situation? Can I also understand how this person likes to send it? If I don't understand the way this person sends the details to me, maybe I need to share why I like it this way. you know?
Maybe.
So that is something that needs to be a lot more transparent. So the feedback is not always about, the behavior or the action, but sometimes you need to be also able to convey or communicate things in the right manner. So the why, if is not understood, the people also end up assuming that, ye to banda aise hi, this person likes things in a certain way.
So that is amazing.
The message is.
It does help to repeat the context over and over again. Repetition does not harm anyone. So in fact, so you made an excellent point, right? I mean, you're working for a single leader or you're working for an organization, right? That's where my thought process of building a company or creating an organization is the leaders actually carry the values ahead, right? So it is, if you echo the same values ahead, leaders are going to be different people, right? The way they manage, their management styles are going to be different, but the values have to be upheld. The kind of company that you want to create, the kind of ecosystem you want to cultivate, if that is upheld, then you know that whether you work in this team or you work in another team, you're going to get same kind of a treatment or same kind of, like growth or whatever it is. Gauri, we are at the tapering end of the conversation, and I have a list of technical models which I am a particular fan of when it comes to giving feedbacks, and because I do prepare before giving feedback to anyone. It could be my boss. I've done that very early on, and I've done from the times when bosses did not expect their subordinates to give them feedback. So I don't know how I caught that. I have not grown up in that environment where I used to tell my parents that they were wrong. I would get a good bashing if I did that. But eventually, anyway, for better or worse, it did happen. My favorite model, go-to model, really, apart from the Pendleton, is always the CEDAR model, because it is very, very scientific in nature. So you set the context, you say what you're going to talk about, what the problem at hand is. Give an example as to what has actually happened and what you would have liked it to otherwise happen. Then you do a collective diagnosis. So it's not just you talking, you're actually sitting with the person and dissect the whole problem with them. First question is, of course, do you think this is a problem or not a problem? And why do you think it is a problem? What could have been done otherwise? So the diagnosis happens collectively. We decide collectively to take a particular action. Again, it is a volunteering mechanism where the person I'm giving the feedback to is actually telling me how he would like to act. If there is no solution right away, I don't hurry or rush through this meeting. I actually break up this meeting and say, okay, let's follow up. It will be a follow-up conversation. You don't have to do everything today. So he or she can get back and then say, okay, this is how I think we are going to fix this. Else, we come up with a solution together. And then we, of course, review. We set a particular timeline and say, okay, this is our review. We meet 2 months later for this specific point. and close it. I love this because, first of all, there is no cadence to it. I'm not attuned to saying that between April to June or April to July, whatever it is, all the reviews are going to happen. It happens when the incident has happened. That's where the context comes. And then it helps keeping the document evolving in that particular manner.
Yes.
I really, really like that.
It makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the second model, which I really love, is the idea model. Identify, describe, encourage, and act. So this is which I do with the team, not a particular individual. But if I feel team as a collective, so because Agile gets very misconstrued time and again. Okay, Agile practices, even though they are, I think it's 20 years now, even though it has been around for so long in so many different flavors and certifications and stuff, the principles of Agile get misconstrued a lot. So we do give a lot of weightage to the team and complete autonomy for the team to function. But that does not mean that they would deliver only at their own pace without meeting the business goals, right? So the goals have to be very, very clearly set. And this idea model, where you actually identify what may not be going right, you describe it. Again, all of these are collective exercises. So you let everybody describe in a team what you want to do. Then you're offering some encouragement. Now, this is not necessarily a reward, but you actually show them how company will do better. If company does better, how they will do better, etc., etc. That's where the encouragement comes into the picture, and then the action. So everybody, the buy-in is so strong within the team that the failure rates of this kind of a model are very, very low. And that I like. So there are different models for individual interactions, and there are different models for team interaction. And I think feedback is an extremely powerful tool,
it's nice,
which can be exploited.
See, there are tools that if you explore, there are dearth of models out there. But what I'm going to, highlight over here is that when you are interacting with people, I think, you have a basic idea about how this person works. What is the working style of this person? How this person likes to receive, details from you, or listen to the questions they ask. Listen to the way, and that's the reason why, as a person who's giving feedback, never get in the give mode. Listen, because the more you listen, the more you understand where that person comes from. I would say that the question is a highlight in the entire conversation. So when the moment you see that the person has questions based on what, everything is about what is this, what is that, it means there is lack of clarity. Maybe that person needs more explanation about certain things. If the question is all about how, maybe there is a lot of challenge when it comes to how am I going to do it. Maybe there is a bigger question out there. Maybe that needs to be tackled first. What I'm trying to say here is, it depends upon the conversation that you have. Build on the conversation. It's not always going to be so. For example, back in those days in school, we were given certain formulas. The formulae had to be by hearted. And, for every sum, that you had to solve, there is a particular formula that you use. And then you realize that, hey, this is how it works. But in life, you don't have a particular formula, right? You can't necessarily use one model everywhere. You need to be open to understand where certain things would work, because we are talking about human beings. I wish we were numbers. I wish we could say 2 and 2 is 4, but we are talking about human beings. We are my guide used to always tell me that, Gauri, how many samples have you collected? And initially, back in those days, I used to find it really funny. Like, samples, ma'am, what are you talking about? And she would keep on telling me that, no, but you need to have enough samples to come to a conclusion, right?
A data point.
And that's where I realized that, seriously, we're all unique samples, isn't it? So just think about it. If we really think about it this way, that if you're connecting with a person, think about the way you need to push someone. Where do you need to push that person? Maybe it's just a nudge that somebody needs. Maybe there are times where you need to pull somebody into agreeing to something. Maybe there are certain occasions where you need to just grab that person's attention to the fault. and that person needs to simply identify that fault, because maybe they don't see the gravity of the issue the way you see it. It depends from where the person sits and sees the things. As a manager, my eyes are always going to be, open, wide. I'll be absolutely out there seeing everything like the bird's eye view. But when the people are on the job, their eyes, ears, hands, everything are engaged. Maybe they're not hyper-focused as you. So maybe that's where, the feedback needs to be a lot more about sharing, like I said initially, that, it needs to be share, the way you share it, the way you seek it, and the way you continue it. Because if that is what you follow, keep it simple, keep it basic. You don't always need to have, colorful ideas and logistics and I don't know what all to impress or to create that kind of a mark on the person, but you need to be able to communicate. And by communicate, when I say, if you are the one who's giving the feedback, listen. It's a myth that you have to talk. Listen. And as a person who's receiving the feedback, I think it's very important for me to understand that it's not only about fishing for compliments that I need to be there. It is not, because that's all music to my ear. I want to listen to all nice things about me. However, it's not always going to be that. What I would rather say is, when it comes to the performance that I'm essentially trying to bring to the table, it is going to be the highlight when I understand how the things went. What is it that was expected? And the way it needs to be worked on. So a quick word about this one, John Gossman. He has spoken extensively about happy marriages.
Okay. Is that an oxymoron or what?
But there are people who have survived, sustained, right? Where they say that, and he's done a extensive research, where he's concluded that a lot of people who are happy as couples end up being as happy as they are, primarily because they're open to understanding the way they tell each other the flaws or the feedback. In a way, they're open to receiving that from each other. The moment I get in the mode where what nonsense, I mean, why are you even saying that to me? The moment I start thinking otherwise, it's like I'm one up in the game, that I need to get back to this person. The moment you're giving me a feedback, how dare you? So if I get in that mode, obviously, it's going to be always a tiff that I'll find. Some way or the other that I need to fight with someone. But the idea is to be able to understand that this culture that one needs to set in, you need to build the culture. You need to have that system in place where the organization on the whole is also open to a feedback culture. Correct. It becomes a lot more easy, systematic. People don't have to really take additional effort to listen or to get that kind of a feedback. It doesn't become that difficult. So I think it's a good idea that as managers, we start looking at doing.
It just becomes your work style, really. It just becomes one of your ways of working, as natural as that. True. Awesome. Gauri, I'm going to conclude this conversation with one of the incidents where I was given a negative feedback, and maybe you can go next or give us a concluding note as well.
Sure.
So there was a time in between when I was like overly defensive with everything. Okay, and not because I thought. So I had thought that I knew myself very well, and I know what works for me and what does not. So if anybody would tell me that, okay, you could have done this differently, I would get extremely defensive and aggressive about it. Okay, and I'm like, okay, this is how I had thought it, and this is how it has been executed and yielded, and this is the result. And people used to be like, okay, you got your results and nothing great about it. Congratulations. But had you done this in a different manner and maybe got even, let's say, even 80% of what you have achieved, you'd have still been appreciated. And that used to get on to me. Like, I'm like, what is wrong with these people? Like, why would they not accept 100% result? And it took me a very long time to actually realize that people don't necessarily value 100% of the results all the time. It is it's the everything that matters. It's not just chasing something like that. It's not always the number of lines of code you write, or just like, and of course bugs are not tolerable, but everything has to be a conversation. And that's where I realized that it's better you talk, and it's very important to talk it out. It may or may not lead to productive or constructive results. It's fine, but at least be assured that you had that conversation and you reached somewhere with it. Because nobody likes surprises. So at the end of the day, if you actually achieve something and still are not satisfied with it, nobody wins really. So yeah, that's what I realized. And I should say I'm still working on it. Not there yet. I still lose it. I become intolerant quite a few times. I don't know why this podcast is becoming so self-deprecating, but it is what it is. But anyway, I'm pretty sure a lot of people will agree. And let me take a poll at the end of the podcast as well. If people agree with this side of mine, if they would have similar feedback, they haven't given me this feedback, but they would probably still agree with it. Yeah, I'll still do that. How about you, Gauri? How would you like to end this podcast?
Well, I would say that one needs to understand to treat people as people when it's giving a feedback to anyone. I would say that it's not a very big deal to receive feedback as well. Ameya, you've made it amply clear right now in this example that you've quoted from your own experience. But I think it's quite important that people also start looking out for the ways and means to share, the ways and means to communicate, and frequency. The frequency also needs to be taken care of, because the more you communicate, the more the feedback becomes easy.
Share, seek, continue. I think that's going to be the
share, seek,
subtext.
Continue. Absolutely, absolutely. True that. Yes.
So cool, Gauri. Thank you so much, Gauri, for doing this for us.